never imagined I'd share something like this, but life has a way of throwing us into moments we can't predict. My name is Katie, I'm 44, and for years I carried the weight of being a single mother. My son grew up and built his own life, and I was left with long, quiet nights and a heart that ached for connection. That's when Tom came into the picture. He wasn't my son, but he had been around our home for years, my son's closest friend, the boy who used to raid my fridge after school and fall asleep on the couch during movie nights. Now, at 22, he had become a man. And I couldn't help but notice it every time he walked into a room. One evening, he came by after work, shoulders heavy with exhaustion, eyes clouded with stress. I offered him tea and a place to rest, and instead of heading to the spare room, he sat beside me. The night was cool, the house wrapped in silence, and something about the closeness felt different, charged in a way I couldn't explain. His head rested lightly on my shoulder, the simple brush of his hand against mine sending shivers across my skin. It should have been nothing more than comfort, but it didn't feel that way. Every breath between us seemed to thicken the air, and every glance carried a question neither of us dared to ask aloud. I tried to play it off, tried to keep my composure, but my heart was racing. His fingers traced slow, careful patterns on my hand, and it felt both innocent and dangerously intimate. For a moment, the years between us disappeared. He wasn't just the boy I once knew, he was a man, looking at me with eyes that saw past my walls. "Are you okay?" I asked softly, hoping to break the tension. His voice was quiet when he answered, low and almost trembling. His words weren't as important as the look he gave me, one that lingered, searching, pulling me in deeper. The room shrank around us, the silence louder than any words. My breath caught when his lips curled into a shy, vulnerable smile, one that told me everything without saying a thing. In that moment, I realized the line we were standing on was fragile, dangerous, and irresistible all at once. A whole new feeling had taken root inside me, something I had never experienced before. It lingered, haunting my thoughts long after that night. Tom went back to his routine of studies and work as if nothing had happened, but for me, the memory clung to every quiet moment. I caught myself watching him without meaning to, at dinner, in passing, even in the way he laughed at something small. The way he brushed his hair back when he was deep in thought, the warmth in his smile, even the tone of his voice, it all seemed sharper, heavier with meaning. I couldn't tell if I was losing control of myself, or if something unspoken had been growing between us all along. "You okay?" he asked one evening, his calm voice breaking through my storm of thoughts. "Just tired," I replied quickly, forcing a smile. But he looked at me a little too long, like he could see past the mask. We were walking a dangerous line, both pretending nothing was happening, both carrying something neither of us had named aloud. Later that night, as I lay in bed, sleep refused to come. My body was restless, my heart racing with thoughts I couldn't silence. I heard soft footsteps in the hallway, and I knew it was him. The dim light shifted under his door, and I lay there, torn between wanting to stay still and needing to move. Curiosity and fear tangled inside me until I couldn't bear it anymore. My bare feet touched the cold floor as I made my way to his room. The door was almost closed, but not fully. I stood there, frozen, battling with myself. "Go back," I thought. But another voice whispered, "Go forward." Before I could decide, the door creaked open. Tom stood there, surprise flickering across his face, but something else too, something that mirrored my own confusion. He didn't speak, just looked at me as if waiting for me to explain why I was there. I thought I heard a noise, I lied, my voice softer than I intended. He didn't call me out, didn't question it. Instead, he shifted slightly, leaving the door open just wide enough to let me in. It wasn't words, but it was an invitation, one that sent a shiver down my spine. I stepped inside, and the air immediately felt different, charged, thick, alive. Every second stretched, every breath heavier than the last, as if the room itself knew the line we were about to cross. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I had seen him make countless times before, but this time I didn't look away. Every movement drew me in, every detail etched into my mind as if it meant more than it ever had. "Can't sleep?" I asked, hoping my voice would ease the tension. Instead, it made the air heavier, almost unbreathable. He shook his head. "Nah, you." I shook my head in return, saying nothing more. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was charged, carrying everything we weren't brave enough to admit. I sat down beside him on the edge of his bed, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. My own betrayed me, reacting in ways I couldn't control, ignoring the warnings screaming in my mind. "It's all right," I whispered, though I knew those words only deepened the storm between us. He turned toward me, and our eyes locked. In his gaze, I saw it all: confusion, desire, fear, and something undeniable, like fate pulling us closer. His voice was rough when he finally spoke. "I don't know what's happening, but I can't stop thinking about that night." My chest tightened, my pulse racing. I wanted to tell him I felt the same way, but no words would come. Instead, I reached for his hand. The touch was small, hesitant, but it carried the weight of everything left unsaid. He didn't pull back. Instead, his fingers intertwined with mine, as if he had been waiting for me all along. His name slipped from my lips in a whisper, but I couldn't manage anything else. Language seemed too fragile, too limited for the flood of emotions between us. Slowly, he leaned closer. His breath brushed against my skin, his presence overwhelming. My heart hammered against my ribs, my thoughts screaming that this was the line we weren't supposed to cross. But in that moment, all the rules, all the roles, all the expectations melted away. And when his lips finally met mine, the world outside us ceased to exist. There was nothing left but the fire we had been holding back for far too long. The kiss was soft, almost hesitant, yet it carried a force I couldn't put into words. My body screamed at me to stop, but my heart clung to the fire in that moment. Logic had no place here, only the unexplainable pull between us. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, silently asking if it was okay to feel what we both already knew. "This shouldn't have happened," I whispered, though my voice betrayed me. He shook his head slowly. But it did. The question of what now hung between us, thick and unspoken. Deep down, I knew the truth: there was no going back. When the morning sun crept through my window, the world felt unnaturally bright, as though it wanted to snap me out of the haze. Yet the weight of the night lingered on my skin, in my thoughts, in the rhythm of my heart. I told myself it had to be a mistake, a blur of emotions from being too close, too vulnerable. But every time I tried to bury it, the memory surged back, stronger, sharper, impossible to ignore. Did he feel it too? That question haunted me as I moved through the motions of the day. Should I confront it? Should I bury it? Most of all, did I even want to forget? I made coffee in the kitchen, focusing on the sound of the machine just to ground myself. But when I heard footsteps on the stairs, my heart betrayed me, racing ahead of reason. He walked in, hair tousled, his eyes still heavy with sleep. For one breathless moment, our gazes met, and I saw it. That same unspoken fire. Hidden beneath the surface of his calm. "Morning," he said, his voice casual, yet weighted with everything we hadn't dared to say. "Morning," I replied, forcing a steady tone, though inside I was unraveling. The silence that followed was almost unbearable, like we were both circling a truth too dangerous to name. Finally, he broke it. "You all right?" A simple question, but in his voice, it meant so much more. He wasn't asking about sleep or the day ahead. He was asking if I felt what he felt. If I was willing to admit it. And in that instant, I knew, nothing between us would ever be the same again. Did I regret what happened? Had it changed anything? I told myself to stay calm, answering with a simple, "Yeah, I'm fine." But inside, I knew my eyes betrayed me. As he moved through the kitchen, every glance, every subtle gesture felt heavier, as if each one carried a silent question, an unspoken invitation to step back into the moment we had shared. "Maybe it's better if we don't talk about this," I blurted out, my voice shaky as I tried to keep control. He frowned, his disappointment impossible to hide. "Why?" he asked, his tone edged with something raw. "We can't just pretend it didn't happen." My hands trembled, and I tucked them behind me, hoping he wouldn't see. But of course, he did. He always noticed. "I don't know what it means," I admitted quietly, my words barely more than a whisper. "But we can't just act like it never happened." He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "So what do we do now?" he asked, his voice steady, his gaze full of determination. When he stepped closer, my heartbeat thundered in my ears. I could feel his warmth, the tension between us undeniable. His hand hesitated for just a second before it brushed against my face, and the touch sent a shiver racing through me. "Do you regret it?" he asked, his voice low, almost breaking. I closed my eyes, searching for the truth. Fear, yes. Doubt, absolutely. But regret, I opened my eyes and whispered, "No." Relief flickered across his face. "Me neither," he breathed. "I know this is complicated. I know it's risky, but I also know it's real. I wanted to deny it, to push him away with logic and rules, but the truth was written in my own heart. He leaned in again, slowly, as if giving me a final chance to pull away. But I didn't. When our lips met, it was slow, tender, exploring. Wrong on so many levels, yet undeniable. Yes, he murmured against my lips, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. But what happens next? The question hung between us, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the answer. Because deep down, I knew we would figure it out, together, even if no one else would ever understand. The next morning was an ordinary Tuesday, but nothing about life felt ordinary anymore. The walls of the house seemed to hum with a secret only we shared. I tried to convince myself that slipping back into routine would erase it all. But how could I ignore the way every thought of him set my body on fire? His touch, his lips, his gaze, they lived inside me now, carved into my memory. I was standing in the kitchen with a cup of coffee when he walked in, his calm expression masking the storm I knew was inside him. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking, his voice firm but laced with hesitation. "We need to talk," he said, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I looked at him and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to escape, to pretend none of this was real, but another part knew the truth, we couldn't keep running from what had grown between us. "Yeah, we do," I whispered back, my voice softer than I intended. He stepped closer, resting his hand lightly against the counter. It was such a small gesture, but to me, it meant everything. Every glance, every word, every silence carried a weight we couldn't ignore anymore. "I can't stop thinking about you," he confessed, his eyes no longer just familiar, they were something more, something dangerous. His words made me shiver. "I can't stop thinking about it either," I admitted, though fear tangled with my desire. "But what does it mean? How do we deal with feelings that feel so wrong but also so right?" He held my gaze, steady and certain. "But what about us?" he asked quietly, and that was the question I dreaded most. I had no answer, only the undeniable truth that when he was near, the world felt smaller, more intimate, like it belonged only to us. Days passed, but the tension didn't fade. Instead, it grew stronger, like fire feeding on oxygen. I found myself noticing everything about him, the way he brushed his hair back, the curve of his smile, the quiet confidence in his steps. Every detail pulled me in deeper. One afternoon, our eyes locked again, and time seemed to freeze. "Why does this feel so right?" he asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. "Because what feels right for us might look wrong to the world." He smiled gently, like he already knew. "So what do we do? Tell the world to buzz off?" His words made me laugh nervously, but it was a laugh filled with longing. If only it were that simple. That night, the sound of soft footsteps filled the hallway again. My heart pounded as the door creaked open. He stood there, hesitating only for a moment before stepping inside. "Can't sleep?" he asked in a quiet voice. I sat up, motioning for him to come closer. He closed the door behind him and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence between us was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable, it was magnetic. "Are you thinking about us?" he whispered. I looked into his eyes, my heart racing. "Yeah," I admitted, "all the time." He sighed deeply, dragging his hand through his hair, a habit I'd seen 100 times, but this time it carried something heavier. "Maybe we shouldn't fight it," he murmured. "Sometimes you just have to follow what you feel, even if it scares you." Tom moved closer, and when his hand found mine, I felt more than just touch, I felt a silent promise. His voice was steady, certain. "We'll get through this together." I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be doubts, fear, and the shadow of judgment. But in that moment, none of it mattered. All I cared about was the bond between us, this unshakable pull that refused to let go. The days that followed were filled with a new kind of tension. Every glance, every silence, carried meaning. Something between us was shifting, growing, impossible to ignore. Yet the question lingered in the air, where would this lead us? That night, I sat on the couch, the soft glow of the lamp painting shadows on the walls. My thoughts were restless, tangled in the storm of everything we had become. Even though Tom was in his room, I felt him, like we were tethered by an invisible thread, pulling us closer with every passing second. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. Then, he appeared in the doorway, barefoot, dressed simply in a t-shirt and sweatpants. To anyone else, it would have looked ordinary. But to me, he had never looked more like a man. Our eyes locked, and in that instant, I knew something had to happen. Words seemed unnecessary, yet the silence itself carried sparks. The air felt charged, electric, as if the walls around us knew our secret. "What's going on?" he asked, his gaze steady, unflinching. I didn't answer right away, my breath caught in my throat. He stepped closer, his voice softer now but loaded with meaning. "I know this is hard. I know the world outside wouldn't understand. But here, between us, everything feels right." His words broke me open. The weight of fear and doubt was still there, but it faded when I looked at him. With him, the noise of the world disappeared, leaving only the raw truth of our connection. "Tom, let's just," I began, but he stopped me gently, his hand curling around mine. His touch was warm, grounding. "I don't want you to feel guilty," he whispered, his voice a mix of tenderness and strength. "And I don't want you to feel confused. All I want is for you to feel me. Us. I just want you to know," he whispered, "you've always been the most important person in my life. It's always been you." Tears stung my eyes as a storm of emotions crashed through me, love, desire, fear, and acceptance all at once. Everything blurred except for him. He leaned in closer until our faces were only inches apart. I saw every detail, the softness of his lashes, the curve of his lips, the spark in his eyes that mirrored my own. When our lips met, time simply stopped. The kiss was slow but charged with everything we had kept bottled inside. Sweetness, need, surrender, it was all there. My hand slid across his face as he pulled me closer, almost as if he feared I might pull away. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless, our hearts pounding in sync. "This changes everything," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Yeah," he agreed softly, "but maybe that's exactly what we need." I knew he was right. There was no undoing what had happened, no erasing what we had set in motion. Whatever the world had to say, this was our truth now, and we would face it together. The night stretched on, but instead of hiding from it, we leaned in. We talked, we laughed, we shared old memories and dreams for a future we had never dared to imagine before. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen, not as a parent, not as someone bound by expectations, but as a person, deeply connected to another soul. We both knew it wouldn't be simple. The outside world had its own rules, its judgments, its harsh lines. But inside our little universe, we chose to follow our hearts. "So what do we do now?" I asked with a small, nervous smile. He shrugged, returning the smile with one of his own. "We live, we love, and we face everything else when it comes." His words, simple yet powerful, sank deep into me. Looking at him in that moment, I knew no matter how complicated the road ahead might be, we would walk it side by side. Life doesn't always follow the script. Sometimes love shows up where you least expect it, breaking every rule you thought you knew. And though the world might never understand, the truth was undeniable, our story had only just begun. At the end of the day, love doesn't always fit into the neat little boxes society gives us. Sometimes it sneaks in, challenges everything we thought we knew, and forces us to face feelings that can't be denied. This story isn't about right or wrong, it's about the messy, complicated, and deeply human way our hearts can betray us. If you've ever felt torn between what the world expects and what your heart demands, then you know, love rarely follows the rules. Disclaimer: this story is a creative retelling meant for entertainment purposes only. Names, events, and details have been adapted to protect privacy. Any resemblance to real people or situations is purely coincidental. Viewer discretion is advised. If this story touched something deep inside you, don't just leave quietly. Share your thoughts in the comments, your voice might be the one that helps someone else feel less alone. Hit like if you believe every heart has its own path, no matter how complicated. And subscribe now, because more raw, unfiltered stories like this are on the way. Every click keeps this space alive for voices that don't always get heard.